Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So we've, for those of you who have not been here in these past weeks, we've been talking about mitigating zombie mind. And since there are new zombie movies coming out these days, I think we're all understanding of what zombie mind is, that maybe we've all got some piece of zombie mind in us. Essentially, that kind of mind that closes down, that it doesn't engage, that it gets sort of empty in the small E word, and just sort of hangs out somewhere. Not quite sure. But anyway, we've spent a couple of weeks talking about that now. We're going to continue for a while, looking at different facets that shine a light on our own selves in regard to how we are in the world and how we are doing in engaging in the world that we are in and making it useful and using the best of ourselves is what we're after. So the first week we talked about leisure, and leisure, making leisure something richer for ourselves. But the word leisure is a deep meaning in Zen, and it means that we are always in the leisure of the Dharma, and that we can, in a sense, rest in the Dharma always, that we are the Dharma, and the Dharma is all that we see. So this is a kind of a leisure, but it doesn't mean that we do nothing either. It means that we're sort of in the realm of the gods in leisure. Be something like that. And then last week we talked about choice, how we choose to do what we do, and how that affects our own lives and those around us and those in our midst. And so this week we are going to talk about yet another subject related about
nuance and novelty.
Yeah, nuance and novelty. And Will and I we have been leading this.
I do not have the questions.
Yeah, you don't have the questions, huh? Your call.
So we're talking about this. But I came across this idea of nuance and novelty some time ago, and I think it was kind of like framed as maybe this way of thinking about the difference between what's so unique about Japan and America, and that sort of seeming chasm culturally. And sort of the idea is that American society is like very driven by novelty. We want the new thing or the latest edition, and when we're done with it, we move on to the next thing, which is like very different from these traditional societies like Japan, where you sort of commit to this one thing in your life. Maybe if you're sort of the artist type, maybe it's calligraphy or no theater or Zen practice, but you sort of devote yourself to this tradition and like kind of follow it through into its artistic depth, which if you are sort of driven by novelty all the time, you might not understand or appreciate that this is a thing and that it is to be cultivated. And I think it is a very relevant part of zombie mind, in this sort of like the level at which we engage what it is we're doing. And I think it's a lot sort of like an Abraham Lincoln quote that I'm pretty fond of. It's that everyone should know something about everything and everything about something. It's sort of like knowing that everything about something is, it's like that following through to see like the complexity and richness that exists in everything. But once you see it in that one thing, then you can kind of slowly appreciate it in all things, which is, I think, what we're talking about.
Indeed. I'm not sure that we've all had such an experience. I've certainly had that experience myself, which I engage really deeply, maybe in the writing of a novel, which takes a long time and deep focus to be with the characters and then to rewrite it again, and to rewrite it yet again, to really do one project to its end. And then to notice when I don't have something like that, I feel a little bit bereft in the world when I don't have something that I am really deeply focusing on. Of course, I do practice Zen, and so there is that. But even within Zen, there are still aspects of practice that we can go deeper into. We, like such as the practice of calligraphy or painting or tea or something that helps us to maintain a deep focus and to drive deeper into the subject or the attention. Maybe it's our own attention to it that is the piece for us that we get hungry for if we are not engaging in something very deep. After we have done something deep, we sort of say, well, what am I going to do now? And so I hope that everybody's had some experience like that in which they've engaged deeply on one subject, and then they know what that means, and that if they do change to another subject, they know what it means to drive deeply. What does Malcolm Gladwell say? 10,000 hours, right? It's 10,000 hours to become okay at something, well, maybe an expert. But that's what you would do for 10,000 hours. If you're going to be a pianist, 10,000 hours it takes of practicing to get to be competent. And I think he's talking about competency, not necessarily great excellence. Competency, 10,000 hours, imagine that.
Because mastery is like definitely like, I think like the why of nuance. It's like the realm of it. But I think we start to do it before we develop an awareness of it. And I think we can develop an awareness of this like engagement before we attain mastery.
Certainly.
But it's like that process through which we learn to like be grateful for the thing that we're doing, to like see into the depth and richness that it like these things have. Like I think for me it was like my first experience with like what we're calling nuance was like playing chess and like being taught the rules and like having played some games and like then knowing people who play chess. And then later on I decided that I wanted to get better, and so I studied chess. And then I realized that like learning the rules is not playing chess. And it's sort of like you can have a song on and not listen to it, but it's like, are you listening to music? Are you engaged in the film that you're watching? Like at what level are you appreciating it? It's like watching a good film and kind of wondering at the mind who was able to make it, what kind of person it was, what motivated them, what they're actually trying to tell you. And this kind of like desperate attempt at communicating something so important that they went through such effort.
Yeah. So, but of course, we have so many films available to us that the novelty of film is easy to overlook that. It's very easy to just hang out for a film and then let it go by. And one of the issues in our culture is the variety of possibility, that we have so much available to us. So it's hard for people to settle down into something that they feel that they like, that they want to do, that they think they could actually love doing, and to settle into it enough to find themselves. I mean, it's through that we find ourselves, that we begin to know thyself through that kind of nuance of attention. Join in, please, anytime. It's not a two conversation. It's just we already talked about it, so we wanted to be able to get started. But to get to nuance, it's frustrating in our culture. Really frustrating thing to say.
Do you feel like it's something that's slipping away, even more so in today's world than in the past?
I think it could be. It's hard for me to say that exactly, to answer that. I mean, what do you think? Do you think it is?
Well, I think it can be applied to so many things, currently,
Yeah.
generationally. I think it does lend itself to lack of depth in
Yeah.
a lot of our existence.
Right. Well, even say meditation practice, people go shopping around and think, well, do I want to do it that way? Do I want to do it this way? So it's window shopping. There's a great deal of window shopping, with churches or so forth, to see, well, I'll take a little of this and I'll take a little of that and a bit of this, and I'll put together my own little scheme, which is not depth. I suppose it could be, but typically it's not, because every tradition in the arts or in spirituality have enormous depth to them if we stay and we engage. And so that's very hard to let people settle into that, whatever they feel is right for them to do.
I think that's a really good way of thinking about what novelty is. It's sort of like that selectivity that keeps you from having the actual experience of the thing. That was sort of the underlying intention of it the whole time.
Window shopping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you don't dive into something, you don't know that you're window shopping. And that's why it's so dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's because you think you have the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you feel sort of smart because that's Abraham Lincoln, you know a little bit about a lot, but not a lot about one thing, right?
You can skip on to the next thing.
Yeah, indeed, and I think it makes us lonely and a bit frustrated, or as though we can't find ourselves because of that. Well, I mean, it's in depth of something that we locate ourselves. So we begin to feel at home in something. Yes, Mickey. Yeah.
I think that in our society, the main thing is lack of time. All the examples that you've given are in the realm of arts or things that we think of as leisure activities. They're to be done after you've made a living, after you've fed the kids. And I for a long time, we had a wonderful Ikebana teacher here in Olympia, who I was able, through Olympia Zen Center, we had some classes. And I've always wanted to take more classes if there was a teacher here in Olympia for me. I'm not going to drive to Seattle or Tacoma to study more Ikebana. And if there was a teacher here, I don't have 10,000 hours. So I just do the best I can.
Well, if you are focusing on something and doing the best you can, if you are reading in the subject and practicing it, that is to begin to drive. If you don't have a teacher, you use the text that you have as a teacher. If there is no teacher in Olympia, you continue to practice it. You don't say, oh, well, I don't have a teacher, so I guess I'm not going to do it.
I do continue, as you know, I continue to practice it every
of course.
week.
Yes.
But I feel that I should be doing so much more. I mean, I think I've kind of developed an eye, but I still can't make the flowers get into the shape that I want.
Sure. Well, if you use some excellent texts to follow, and you can, I mean, in the Japanese style of learning, you copy until you realize what's going on, and then you begin to develop your own style. But you have to copy if you don't know anything else. I mean, we do that if we play the piano. You're copying Mozart. when you read Mozart and onto the keys. And you play until you develop your ability to actually play Mozart without just desperately looking for the right chords and notes. But failing a teacher, we still, if that's what you love, you do it anyway. So you practice.
And I think too, Mickey, to appreciate that doesn't sound like zombie mind at all.
Not.
I mean, like, I think that frustration and that, like, making things happen is sort of beyond our control, and how much time we have is something that I think we're in some sense subject to. But that to engage it is that awareness that we're talking about. I mean, precisely.
Some of our greatest writers in literature worked full-time and then came home and wrote by pencil and pen, page after page after page, this thick novels.
Well, most of them did.
Yeah, so, granted, maybe they had somebody to cook for them and do their laundry, et cetera,
But
but,
feed their kids.
but they
It's
did
called
that.
a wife.
Sure, exactly, yeah, but they did it still, and I think it once again goes to last week's subject about choice, about what, although we may have many, many things going on in our lives that we're responsible for, we still make a choice about the 1 hour that we have left. And that can be precious. That can be a precious hour. If that is a fulfilling hour, writing 2 more pages of your novel, or painting just one little tiny corner of your canvas, or moving your clay in such a way, whatever that is, then that's everything.
I think this itself is, I think, a fine point to make around nuance and novelty. And that American mentality, I think, of like that all or nothing. It's like we
Yes.
think about like writing the novel versus not. But I think to like engage in this way is to like maybe write for 20 minutes. And just how much more fulfilling life can be when you just take time to do and to connect to something meaningful to you. Even if it's a long road that will take many years, it's still doing it.
William Carlos Williams, he was a pediatrician, very, very busy medical life. And he had a roll down, remember those old roll down desks? So in between patients, he would roll it up and he would write a few more lines, pull it back down again, so he, had all his writing. And he is one of America's greatest poets in the 20th century. And that's when he wrote most of his work, in between patients. And then when he came home and he went up into his attic and wrote some more, yeah.
I was thinking of something I'm writing when you said about getting the flower the way you want it. I can't get the writing the way I want it.
Yes.
I think a lot of times it's about staying engaged, recognizing that it's not where I want it to be, and that I can stay engaged with it and learn from it, and it might get closer, and that it's the process. The novelty maybe is the thing that I'm trying to create, but the reality, the nuance might be the process of the creating. And that if I can rest and be alert in the creating process, I can be better concentrated, less likely to slip off into zombie or sloth and
Yeah.
torpor.
Yeah. If you're at your desk, the muse will appear.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that's it.
But I think this is like another way of synthesizing this idea. It's like the novelty is the novel, but the nuance is like the words and the sentences and the pages. And it's like you write it words and sentences and pages at a time.
Mhm.
People don't just write a novel.
You might think it for a moment. that drags you in, and then the characters take off on their own, and they've got their own a life of their own, and they don't. You can't do what they want to do. I mean, you can't force them into something. They've got their own life, so it's really interesting to engage in that way
Right.
and let that go.
Right. See what they have to say to you.
Yeah, yeah,
Make space for that.
yeah, right. But that, as Will said, that's the engaging in the nuance of the shaping, how those, being with those characters to allow them to shape and to shape you, so that you're informed to know what they want to do. I mean, that's deep nuance. So
So you become the bouquet.
yes, that's it. You are the flower, Mickey.
No, I've made a different choice, actually, as you know. For right now.
Yeah.
For right
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
but I really worry about, do I have 10,000 hours left in this life? That is what
Sure
I
you
worry
do.
about.
Sure you do. Well, you can't think about the end of the 10,000 hours. The question is, are you willing to engage in it, to give yourself to it? And, the 10,000 hours accumulate, but you don't count them, or you don't look at that end result. You just keep doing. And if you are engaged, those 10,000 hours come, and then you earned about a penny a word, right? A penny a page, maybe. But it's not about counting those or about looking at the end result at all. It's not what we do.
When I look in my experience, there's been so many things that I've wanted to do solely because I thought maybe I could be good at it. And then, I think as a young man, it was the exception to do something on pure enjoyment. I think playing pool, it's I just love playing pool. Or bowling, I'm terrible at these things. But there's really not that many things that I just enjoy doing that I'm completely terrible at. But it's more fun, I think. I think maybe that's another facet of nuance. It's not that all or nothing thing, I've mastered it or not, or this is the road to something else. It's you're doing it and engaging it in such a way that it's pleasurable to you. I think that's part of nuance as well.
And a big part of nuance is also failing every time. We take up some art or we engage in something, we constantly fail. And we have to be willing to allow that it is not about seeking perfection in anything either. It is about being competent at something, but knowing that we fail continually. Is it Dogen Zenji who said, every day I fail. Every day of failure. I think Suzuki Roshi said the same thing. And anybody who's a painter knows, or engaging in art, painting or sculpture, anything like that, you never create what was in your mind, even with writing. You never succeed in fulfilling what was in your mind. It's impossible.
Yes, but often that makes it better.
Yes, exactly. You fail in some exquisite way, and it is
A happy accident.
exactly, yeah. So when we are doing calligraphy, you paint and the brush starts to fall apart, and so you come through, and these are not called mistakes, they are called accidentals. So Karen, that's what those are. Those are masterful accidentals that occur because you were there, and the muse does that. The muse holds your hand in a certain way and you don't even know it, and something happens, and it's very exciting. Wow, right. But so in calligraphy, they're accidentals, not mistakes, and then they're gorgeous, and that's what they're called, gorgeous accidentals. So, but you have to be doing it.
Do you have to make a lot of mistakes before you get to the accidentals, or?
Oh yeah, sure. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Because, go ahead,
Oh, I
yeah, you're a
said
painter.
sometimes you get lucky early and you think
Yeah.
you've mastered it, but you just got lucky early.
Yeah, and if you have an artist's eye, then you get a bit lucky, it's true. But, you make lots of mistakes. And so I was a student of calligraphy in Japan, and Tokunaga Sensei was my teacher. And I did my homework religiously. She said, you should give us homework every week. And I went home and I painted like crazy every week. And finally, after about 3 months, I did just one character that I thought was pretty good. And I was so excited because I always brought my homework to her. And I brought my homework to her and she looked at it and she says, "Oh, that's wonderful." And she took an orange paintbrush and she drew a big orange circle around it. And there was that. Or the potter. We know that Zen story, the potter. So you make this beautiful pot and you know that it's the most wonderful pot you've ever made. And the teacher comes along and says, "Oh, that's wonderful." Smash. "Now, let me see you make that. Happy to be in the sun." So it's like that.
In my experience, I learned this through my exposure to Japanese culture, that like beauty of the accidental. I think like this is one of the things like Zen has to teach us. It's just like implicit. Like when you do that, it's like when you laugh at yourself or something, you know, or you see that thing that you never saw before. I mean,
Yeah. And that happens in practice because we're so focused and concentrated on it, and then you look up and you see something incredible.
you know you're alive
Mm-hmm.
in a way that it's just so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So anybody, anything else at all? Well, we're just trying to wake up in a few different ways and, trying to suggest awareness of our own lives in daily activity, in daily life. So, anybody, anything else? Yeah, Bob.
I mean, listening to everyone tonight, it seems that a distinction's being made between creative activity, whether it's writing or sculpting or music. These are creative endeavors. Philosophy can be a creative endeavor, a search,
Cooking,
cooking,
gardening.
and so on, as opposed to novelty. What kept cropping up for me when you talked about novelty was simply consumption. We're consumers, and we're taught to be consumers, and we're taught to define ourselves through our consumption, and I mean, it's a completely different
Yeah.
way of being in the world, I think.
Yeah, Neil Postman speaks to some of that, doesn't he?
But I think what's so sad, and like maybe actually a completely other conversation, but like art can also be all about novelty and consumption.
Mm-hmm.
When you're just passively like taking some experience to get some desired feeling, I
Mhm.
think.
Sure.
I think
How
it happens all the
advertising.
time.
How many artists have ended up in marketing and using their skills to, fabricate delusion for people? So,
Yeah.
But I think it has to do a lot too. It's like we talked about that frustration of there being so much out there now.
mm-hmm.
And it's like now there's so many things out there that are really driven for profit. It's like how many movies are made, not because they're good movies per se, but that they know that they can make money off of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that's part of like why, like having that education and nuance will just enrich your life immensely. To like be able to distinguish between these like two sets of very different things, between people who are actually trying to engage you in some meaningful way and people who are trying to get your money. So I think the why
Sure.
of this.
Mm-hmm.